The Alabama Crimson Tide are in yet another college football playoff. They've only missed one in the history of the college football playoff. They will face the Cincinnati Bearcats, as we all know. And today we're going to dive in. How does Alabama beat Cincinnati? It seems like it's pretty obvious, but there are things that they can do, that they need to do in order to win that game. Now, the first thing we'll talk about are the key players. Bryce Young is obviously the first key player. He's really almost a lock for the Heisman. I don't think anybody else really deserves that award. I think that he is the only one that really has proven himself, has had a Heisman moment, and shown that he can be that Heisman guy. There's no one really else that's standing out like that. He has over 4,300 yards with 43 touchdowns and only 4 picks as a freshman. It's pretty impressive for a freshman, and he's got a couple more years to go with the Tide. So the fact that he's already here is pretty remarkable. Next, we have Will Anderson, another guy who he was snubbed really from the Heisman finalists. He has 27 and a half tackles for loss. He's double digits more than the next closest guy, 14 sacks, just an absolute monster on the defensive side of the ball for Alabama. If he is having a good game for them, Cincinnati doesn't really stand a chance. The big matchup for Cincinnati, if you watch that video, was that they have to be able to contain the front line for Alabama. Will Anderson is one of those guys that they're going to have to block. Lastly, Evan Neal. Offensive line at times has been a struggle, has been a kind of a weakness for Alabama. So having a good game from that group is going to be huge. Evan Neal is a future potential top 10 pick. And if he plays like that against Cincinnati, the Bearcats really don't stand a chance if the offensive line is just mowing them down. Matchups to watch. We talked about Evan Neal. I think I mentioned the Cincinnati video. Evan Neal versus Myjai Sanders is one of the most underrated matchups that we are not talking about enough. Myjai Sanders is an absolute beast, and I think that Evan Neal is also a beast. So we're getting those two going against each other. You're telling me you don't want to watch that? That's crazy. This is a guy 6'7", 360 pounds going against Myjai Sanders, who's 6'5", 260. But he's extremely long. If you watch his film, he has great length in his arms, and he's also very explosive off the ball. Most of the competition that he faced, including Notre Dame, who's the 5th best team in the country, struggled to block him. Next up, Brian Robinson versus Darien Beavers. Again, another underrated matchup. This one probably is underrated within this game. I think that Brian Robinson has shown he is very capable of pass blocking, but also he's a solid runner. Alabama needs to be able to establish the run against Cincinnati, and Brian Robinson obviously plays a big role in that. Darien Beavers is having a phenomenal year for Cincinnati. I think that he is going to play a big role in determining how slow Alabama plays in the run game, how they're able to slow this offense down, because that's going to be something they need to do. Last matchup to watch, Bill O'Brien versus Mike Tressel. Bill O'Brien has kind of come under some scrutiny this year with his play calling, but we saw it 2 weeks ago against Auburn. People didn't really like what he was calling. Last game against Georgia, people obviously thought that he was calling a great game, but that's what happens when your playmakers are making plays versus when they're not. He also didn't have Jamison Williams for most of one game, and he did for the other one. So that's going to be something to pay attention to. Mike Tressel has really picked up where Marcus Freeman left off for Cincinnati. This is a very experienced and talented Cincinnati defense, and I think that he's going to be tested because they're facing a really good Alabama team like we've talked about. And who wins this matchup? If Bill O'Brien is calling a good game and he's getting the best of Tressel, Alabama's going to run away with this. But if Tressel is able to put in some different looks, show some different things that they didn't show on film, then maybe that screws Alabama up, that messes with Bryce Young, that creates some turnovers. That is going to be a big matchup, I think, that determines how close this game is for how long. Keys to the game now. First one contained Desmond Ridder. We haven't talked about Desmond Ridder in this video yet. Desmond Ridder is the key to Alabama's focus. Slowing him down, keeping him in the pocket is going to be huge. Desmond Ridder is very good at being elusive in the pocket. We know that he can throw, but it's his legs that haven't gotten as much attention. And I know that Nick Saban is going to make that a focal point. He's going to say, hey, just because this guy isn't running a lot this year, I mean, he's run for over 360 yards, which isn't a ton, but he can run. Cincinnati just doesn't like to use him in the running game as much. They want to keep him healthy. So Nick Saban's going to emphasize this guy can run. He's fast. He's elusive, and you're going to have to be able to contain him. So that goes back to Will Anderson. Containing Desmond Ridder is going to fall on Anderson's shoulders. It's going to fall on that defensive line, those linebackers, and how well they're able to do that determines how successful or not Cincinnati's offense is going to be. Next up, you have to somehow expose Cincinnati's back seven. Even the secondary, Ahmad Gardner, Kobe Bryant, Javon Hicks, Brian Cook, Arquan Bush. Those are 5 guys that can cover anybody in the country. And you have to prove, if you're Alabama, that they can't cover you. Now, you don't have John Mechie. That's a huge loss. Jameson Williams is an absolute monster. You have to get him the football as much as possible. I think one of the matchups we talked about in the Cincinnati video is Williams versus Bush. If Williams is just torching Bush in the slot, then I think that this game blows wide open. But if you're able to get some of your other guys involved and expose a guy like Sauce Gardner, I don't think that's possible. But if you're able to do that, or even Kobe Bryant, then you're in great hands. I think that if you're able to open up that passing game and make that Cincinnati secondary question what's going on, then the floodgates are going to open. Speaking of the floodgates, last point, open the floodgates. This is an Alabama team that is far more talented than Cincinnati. There's no debating that. It's not a knock on Cincinnati. Alabama is just a more talented team. You have to play like that. You don't want this team hanging around. Don't give Cincinnati a chance at even competing in this game. You have to make this game over as soon as possible. So whether that's in the first quarter, second quarter, put the game away, make Cincinnati question everything that they're doing, and you'll be just fine. You know, Alabama is predicted to win. There's a reason for that. They're the number 1 team in the country right now. They've been the number 1 team in the country or near it nearly every single year. So this is a team that's more talented and a team that should be doing just anything that they can to make Cincinnati go away and quit. And that's going to be a thing that I really want to look at. How long is this game close? Because the longer this game goes on where it's a close game, Cincinnati's winning or even within a score or two, then I think that confidence in Cincinnati builds. You have to wipe away any of that confidence that Cincinnati might have and just prove exactly why you're Alabama and why you're in the middle of one of the best dynasties we've ever seen in the sport.